Hello everybody, my name is Manues and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video series here on my channel. It's time for another Rakano update. Since due to the changes recently to Stone Scar and the subsequent decrease in Stone Scar decks, the very heavy anti-Stone Scar tuned list that Unearthly came up with, and I helped them fine-tune a bit in my last video, basically is not really up to date anymore. So we have to go more back to the roots a bit, and this list is within a few cards of what Truedawn is currently running. And since we mostly agree on like most decisions in the deck, and he basically like turned me on to Fearless Nomad as like an additional 1-drop, I want to give some credit to him here, and he's basically running like a list that's 1 or 2 cards off from this on ladder to climb with success currently, and the list feels really good. So let's talk about the list. Like, first of all, like the biggest thing that came from Truedawn basically is running 12 1-drops with Fearless Nomad. Like, while Truedawn is convinced that Fearless Nomad is better than Pyroknight, and if he runs a list with 8 1-drops, he only runs Nomad and Oni Ronin. I don't agree with that, simply because I think it's actually very important to be able to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop with the deck, because that is like your best draws and puts a lot of decks so much on the back foot that they have a hard time defending against it and recovering from it, and Nomad rarely being an actual 1-drop doesn't make that possible. But once we are running 12 1-drops, I really like Nomad, because then you often have like more than one 1-drop, and dropping like either triple 1-drop, like going 1-drop into Nomad plus another 1-drop, or even double Nomad on turn 2 is pretty brutal, especially on the play. And it is like the best, or one of the best options. Like, other options would be like infantry, which is kind of bad because the deck just doesn't run that much power to fuel it. The upside is, of course, it is reliably playable on 1, but not that reliable, since the deck is not that heavy on Justice for turn 1 anyway, due to the monuments. So it wouldn't be as consistent turn 1 as the red 1-drops. And yeah, the fact that Nomad has Overwhelm makes it great with Warcry triggers and weapons. And so far I have really liked the idea of like the 12 1-drop explosiveness with Nomad, so Truedawn definitely had like a nice idea and instinct there with this triple 1-drop setup. The deck feels much more aggressive and explosive with this setup, so shout out to him. Check out his stream. I'm gonna like link it somewhere up here in the card, so you can check it out. He doesn't really have a YouTube yet, but he is streaming regularly, and he's definitely one of the most watchworthy streamers out there right now, in my opinion, so check him out. The other thing that is pretty big that we kind of came up with independently is Ijin, and it's nice to see that he likes her too and came up with her as well, independent of each other. I basically experimented with 1 or 2, mostly 1 Ijin as like an additional 3-drop a while ago, but there was a time where I didn't play much Rakano anymore anyway, and only like considered it and played it a bit, so I didn't have like a fully formed opinion on it, and also not a Rakano list that I generally like too much, so that's why there was no like video with Ijin in it so far. Basically the last video was just Unearthly's like slightly fine-tuned anti-Stone Scar familiar Voltron heavy list, where Ijin didn't really fit that well, which is why so far Ijin didn't really get the time to shine. I discovered her too late. Like, if I would have discovered her after my first Rakano video, I would have played her over Cavalry earlier potentially, since 1 or 2 Ijin are pretty nice. Also, it definitely helps the card right now relative to before that there's barely any Lightning Storm, since going 1, 2, 3 and your 3-drop still dying to Lightning Storm can be kind of a big deal. And granted, Ijin is kind of fragile with the 2 health, but the thing is, like, given that she is multi-faction, means that she doesn't die to Annihilate, then she doesn't die to Vanquish either because she has only 3 strength, which makes her still fairly resilient. And the thing is, if she doesn't get silenced or removaled, she completely runs away with the game. Like, if you get to your 4th turn with Ijin and drop like a force undepleted power and get to activate her once, that's already such a huge gain that past that, even if the opponent answers her, they might just lose the game regardless, especially if you went 1-drop, 2-drop and put like an Ijin Mithril Armor on, say, a Rakano Outlaw. Having like a 6/6 quick draw is so brutal, especially against all these time decks with their Titans that suddenly can't stop the Outlaw anymore. It's just really great. Also the time decks have, especially the Elysian decks, have a hard time dealing with Ijin. They basically have Permafrost mostly and that's it. And you can even like unlock Ijin, a Permafrosted Ijin later on with the Blade. And yeah, the card is just very dominating, especially in like removal light matchups where board state and units matter a lot, especially against Elysian, for example, since just churning out multiple Mithril Armors over multiple turns completely takes over a game. Like, people just can't beat that. It even beats Cerso because a unit with a Mithril Armor will still be a 6/6 against the Cerso, for example, and with the 2nd Mithril Armor it doesn't even lose to Cerso anymore, basically. So yeah, the card is a bit hit or miss, but when it's like a miss, it's not a bad miss, it's just trades with a removal like any other card, and we have a lot of 1 and 2 drops that already like tax the early removal of the opponent, so often our 3-drop will like survive because the removal has already been spent on the 1 and 2 drops. And if she doesn't die, then she goes ham on the board with her Mithril Armors and just completely overpowers a lot of decks and gives the deck like an angle to keep up with like the beefier decks like Elysian and Combray and stuff like that, that usually drop a lot bigger units that outclass ours, and being able to match them thanks to Mithril Armors is a big deal and stomps games that we would otherwise get stomped in my experience. So yeah, give the card a try. Heavily underrated and underutilized. Card is either dead to removal, as a lot of early drops in this deck, and usually trades fine with removal, and if it doesn't, it usually wins the game. So it's like, at worst you lose a bit of tempo by getting her blown up by a 1-mana removal spell, and at best she just wins the game for us. And it's also not like the opponent's 1-mana removal or 1-power removal isn't already working overtime against our 12 1-drop, 12 2-drop deck anyway. Other than that, we basically have the standard stuff like 4 Finest Hour, 4 Torch, the 12 2-drops. Crownwatch Paladin is worse, but it's still a necessary evil. I mean, it really sucks that it trades with a bunch of really bad units now, but the Aegis is just very important against removal heavy decks. 3 Vanquish, as usual, just great removal, more important than ever with so much time around. Definitely debatable to even consider a force currently with so many Vanquish targets all over the place. Normally I'm not a fan of 4, but currently there's definitely an argument to be made for considering 4. I still like 3 though in like an aggressive deck, because the card is still a reactive removal and it is limited in its uses, so I don't like to have too many of those cards, but if there's any time for running 4 Vanquish in an aggressive deck, it's probably right now. And then we have the 4 Enforcers and 4 Hammer of Might, as usual. Both staples of the deck and just very essential to the power of the deck. Not much explanation needed here anymore, I think, at this point. And as Curve Topper, there's 2 Blades. The deck runs 28 power, so 2 5-drops seems like a good number with 28 power, especially because the monuments are virtual 5-drops as well. And You have to keep in mind 5 drops in an aggressive deck that is not built to reliably hit 5 power are more of like a curve topper, like a game breaker for some games that you can't win without like that extra punch of power. And also, since while we are not built to reliably hit 5 power, we are built to reliably hit like 3.5 to 4 power, and that also means we still have a pretty high percentage of hitting 5 plus power, which is why having some high impact 5 drop that wins in games that go a little longer, where we actually hit 5 power, and also Pyroknight for the games, for the same amount, for the same kind of games, where we even potentially hit the 6 power to sink our power into. Definitely help the deck in like its consistency and staying power when the opponent doesn't get simply overwhelmed and overrun by our early assault and mounts a solid defense, and then being able to, especially if we have a power heavier draw, go like 5 power, drop a blade, 6 power, drop a pseudo mithril armor on our Pyroknight thanks to the ultimate, are two things that really help us keep up with like the bigger units that people drop at those stages in the game, for example. And yeah, 2 is nice because keep in mind the 5 drop is still basically -1 hand card until we hit the 5th power, and virtual card disadvantage is definitely a relevant factor in aggressive decks that run a low curve so they can use their power efficiently, dump their hand as fast as possible to get as much like impact per card, and also basically having cards sit in your hand with power to use, but the card not being usable because it's too expensive definitely matters. Like there will be games where you have a blade in your hand, you can't play it, and you can't play anything else, and if the blade would be something that could impact the game right now, you would win, and because it isn't, you will lose. So these 5 drops, these like high curve cards that are sort of situational in aggressive decks, definitely come at a cost. Blade is powerful enough in a lot of situations to definitely be worth it, but it is something to be aware of, that it is not free, and it comes with a trade-off and should be used with caution and in proper doses. And 2 is a pretty good number in a 28 power deck like this, that is this aggressive, to sometimes have like this 5 drop to push the opponent over the edge if he managed to stay afloat until then. And yeah, the 2 monuments are additional way to mitigate some flood, and also have like some more pushy plays, like plays that have immediate impact on the board, make like an attacker that got stalled out by a blocker able to attack again and stuff like that. And yeah, the power base is still the same. Heavier on fire for our mostly red 1-drops. Monuments in green, first of all because it's a better monument, second of all because we don't need turn 1 justice. And yeah, 12 dual lands to make our early power deployment consistent, and also more reliably be able to support Champion of Glory, Ijin, and Valkyrie Enforcer. Alright, that's it for the deck list. As usual, gonna be playing 6 games over 2 videos with the deck at Master's Rank to show it in action. So stay tuned for the games in a moment. Thanks for watching.